Donald Trump Jr. Don, it's been a long time since we've talked, period. How are you?
I'm doing well, buddy. Good to be back with you.
It's good to be back. Are you north or south right now, may I ask?
I'm actually in North Carolina, a political event, just working, making sure we stay in this fight, buddy.
All right. Very, very good. You work hard at this. People may not realize it nationwide, but you do. All right. So we have Joe Biden, who said today he has no regrets about his documents. The FBI has treated him like Hillary Clinton, and they've treated the former president quite differently. What do you make of all this?
Well, I think it just shows the hypocrisy that's continually jammed down our throats, Mark. When you see what's going on right now, what are we at? The fifth batch of classified documents in the house that was, I guess, rented by Hunter Biden with his Chinese Communist Party connections, with Ukraine connections, with his Russian connections. He's renting a house in Delaware for $50,000 a month from his dad. I mean, that's definitely not 10% for the big guy, right? That definitely doesn't reek of corruption. And but in all fairness, Mark, imagine if it was me. What would they be saying? I did a search on Compass, the real estate website, to find out what's the most expensive home in Wilmington, anything for $4,500 a month. That's the best thing. You think Hunter's renting for $50,000 and it's not corruption? You think that's not the kickback? You think that's not the 10%? It's absolutely disgusting. So now he had access to the classified documents. You have the ones at the Penn Center. The Penn Center didn't just magically show up the day after Joe Biden stopped being vice president. It took a while to establish and build, and the Chinese Communist Party funded that to the tune of $54 million. And those documents are just lying around there. Joe Biden had the gall to go on TV and talk about how irresponsible, yada, yada, yada. The Mar-a-Lago documents, it was known by the National Archives. It was at Trump's personal residence. It was under lock and key, and it was guarded by the United States Secret Service. And as president, he had the ability to actually declassify those documents. Joe Biden didn't do, or couldn't do. And they have the gall to go out there and do their whataboutism and tell you how much different it is. It's absolutely disgusting, and it shows you there's no equal justice under the law.
100% right. In fact, I would argue the Biden situation is much worse. He had the documents for 6 years. He had them in different locations. He hasn't been forthcoming at all. Your father knew where they were. The FBI came in. They knew where they were. They said throw another lock on the door, which he did. You're exactly right. Anybody who's been lucky enough to go to Mar-a-Lago, that place is a fort. You can't get the hell in and out of there without permission, period. It's not, we're roaming around in a phony think tank, or I got my documents are next to a Corvette or anything of the kind. And what do you make of the fact, Don, that they appointed a special prosecutor to go after your father, who has all the characteristics of a hitman, a political hitman, and then they appoint this other guy for Biden, and they only appoint this one for Biden after 60-some days where they covered it up as long as they possibly could.
Yeah. Well, the most disgusting aspect of it, which reeks of the policy, is they waited till after the election. They knew it was before the midterms. They had the basics of this information, and then they wait. And then they appoint someone who absolutely hates Trump to go after Trump, and they appoint a never-Trumper to look at Biden. I mean, we all know and it's going nowhere. It's just like the decision today, where magically, they appoint someone from, the security guard at the Supreme Court to look into the magically they can't find out where it was. If it was a conservative leak that benefited a conservative cause, weaponized against the American people right before an election, someone would be in jail by now. But now magically they can't do it. It's hard, Mark, to have any trust in these systems anymore. The media covers it up. Everyone's on the payroll of the Democrat Party, it seems. The only people just look at where we are now versus where we were under Trump. Even in the midst of a pandemic, it's not even close. And yet, as long as the Washington, D.C. elite can get rich, as long as we can keep fueling these wars, and you've heard all the commentary about how we need to be engaging now today at Davos, all the billionaires preaching about climate change, flying on their private jets, burning up a carbon footprint like no human being on Earth has ever done before. telling you, the American people, you can't have a gas-burning stove. But, the rules are never really going to affect them, Mark, so we'll just keep going this way. It's absolutely disgusting. And I just hope that there's a point where I hope it's extreme enough that regular people that aren't consuming this stuff like you and I do on a daily basis are realizing just how flagrant it is. They don't care. They're throwing it in our faces, and they're laughing. It's disgusting.
Do you think the Republican Party has learned anything from these elections, 2020, 2022, on how to deal with the Democrats and their lawyers and the changing the rules and early voting and all the rest? Because to me, until they figure out what's going on and actually do something about it, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I actually don't think so, Mark, because the reality is in politics, there's no consequence for the Republicans to lose. If you're a weak Republican in Washington, D.C., it's actually a much easier existence than it is to fight. I mean, for me, I've done pretty well in that space in politics. I was a real estate guy from New York City. The difference is I had the ability to fight, the willingness to fight. It's why guys, Chris Pavlovsky at Rumble started like, hey, will you do a podcast and talk about these things? Because the people, you're an exception because you actually get out there and fight, but so few on our side are willing to fight. So and people are coming to me, hey, do a podcast and tell the American people about what's actually going on. So I shouldn't have to fill that void, right? I was a real estate guy with no experience in politics. I had my beliefs. I had a system of beliefs. I'm willing to fight and engage. And that's enough. And that shouldn't be the case. We should have a bench of people on our side that are willing to do that. But in D.C., again, you'll get rich, you get on a board, if you shut up when it really matters, who cares if you're letting down your constituents that vote for you?
Now, Don, I heard you mention a podcast. Tell us about that.
Well, I've been a big believer in the free speech movement, someone who's been an early adapter in a lot of those concepts. And the guys at Rumble asked me if I would do something law enforcement, try to second verified user on that platform. It's like, but without the censorship, without if you're a conservative, we're going to crush your reach, or you're going to wake up one morning and be totally demonetized or deplatformed. And so they asked if me being one of those guys is just willing to say the things that need to be said, call out the nonsense, if I would do something. So twice a week, I'm going to do a podcast. There's an interactive component where people can ask questions and go, because I am a believer in free speech, and I'm also a believer that the free speech in America as we know it is totally at risk right now. I think anyone who's been paying attention for the last years probably sees what's at stake. And so, while, perhaps that's not my day job, I think I've been a fighter in that field, as you have, Mark, and you've done an awesome job. And even in some of the big corporate where, they haven't necessarily been pro that, you've been willing to take that on. It's awesome to see. We just need more Americans to be willing to do that. And if I'm willing to take the heat for it, I'm glad to be a part of that movement. And so I'm just really excited about it. Going to have some fun with it and make sure that people see what's going on. I've had a fly on a wall type of view of America, of government. I've had 50 hours of congressional testimony for treason for stuff that was nonsense. So we all now know it's a lie. And I'm looking at Hunter Biden with the crack and the prostitutes and China and Ukraine and Russia and documents and Axe Garage and $50,000 renting $1 million home, which would be one of the great real estate deals of all time, Mark. I can't believe I missed this in my former career. I didn't realize Wilmington, Delaware was such a real estate asset where your rental income could pay for your property in 1 year. That's truly spectacular, but maybe I just wasn't that good at real estate. So I'm just excited to do something at it, continue to be a leader in the fight. I believe in this stuff. I have 5 young kids that I want to, really leave a country that we recognize. And I truly believe that's at risk. And while it would have been much easier to shut up, be a real estate from New York City, don't buck the system, call people out, there's just far too much at stake. And so, we got to be a part of that.
And Rumble is quite the enterprise, isn't it? Mr. Producer, we're on Rumble, right? I'm talking about social media. What is it? At Mark Levin Show.
Well,
so we post
it's
over
basically,
there.
Yeah, you guys do a great job on there, and it's YouTube that you can not have to worry about being censored in the morning, right? It's got a very large platform, millions and millions of users, probably comparable to Twitter in size of users. YouTube is obviously the big juggernaut out there, but YouTube is just incredibly bad at censoring anything that doesn't fit that narrative. Certainly in conservatives, we've all seen someone that's been deplatformed, demonetized. And so Rumble was the one social media platform that didn't throw Donald Trump off. Back in the day, I was one of the early users on the platform, and I want to make sure, and I think we all do, we have a responsibility as Americans to make sure people that are willing to go against that grain, that are willing to go against the Democrat talking points and the leftist narrative, and make sure that we preserve that free speech. It's so important. So I was happy to do this with them. And so, yeah, check it out on, just sign up to follow me on Rumble. I think you'll like it. We'll have some fun in the process, but follow you there. Follow other people. I think what we've seen, Mark, is that, while the others pretend they're for all these things and liberty and freedom, they're for it until you go against the grain even a little bit. We've even seen them cancel people that are would be otherwise considered very left-wing for going against one single talking point. They're 99% of the way there, but they're not 100, so they're just done. They're out of the movement. That doesn't work. I mean, we're truly becoming communist China right now. And so we have an obligation as freedom-loving Americans to support those businesses and help those businesses and, frankly, ignore those businesses that are doing the opposite, promoting freedom. And I think we're actually at a precipice. And for me, as a business guy, I'm seeing so many of these guys that are now finally willing to say, you know what, I'm no longer turning the other cheek. I'm not going to support the businesses that if they had their way, they would put us into gulags. And that's evidenced by, look what's happened at Disney stock. It's down 50%. Netflix, people are over it. They've seen what they've done. And for the first time in a long time, conservatives are actually pushing back. They're voting with their wallets. They're voting with their presence. They're voting with their views and saying, you know what? These guys hate my guts, and I'm no longer turning the other cheek. So that's where we actually need to be. So I'm just really psyched to be supporting a company that went all in on that movement, that didn't buy into the narrative. They didn't take the easy way. They chose to fight because I think that's where we all need to be right now.
And you also founded a publishing company, didn't you?
I did. I did that with our friend Sergio during the pandemic. I noticed I put out a New York Times #1 bestseller, and I came back after that and was going to put out a second book, and I started looking at the numbers that they were giving me. I'm like, wait a second, now I'm a proven author. I know I can sell books. Well, they wanted to control a narrative, and they wanted to change the way I said things, and they wanted to say, well, that's too hard. You can't say this. And I wasn't saying anything that was all that far out there. And so this was mainstream conservative thought. I saw congressmen and senators that literally had book contracts signed but canceled because they were pushing mainstream conservative content. So we founded Winning Team Publishing. We published my book. It turned it into a bestseller. The New York Times wouldn't look at it, even though I would have been a bestseller there. They wouldn't even acknowledge it, even though I was Amazon #1, I was Barnes & Noble #1, I was Books A Million #1. That's the fight we're in. These people, if you even make a dent in there, you don't even exist in their minds. And so for us, we wanted to make sure that in a very liberal world of publishing, that people had an outlet to be able to come and say what they're actually thinking. Again, it's hard to believe that in America in 2023 that a guy like me, a real estate developer from New York City, has to be someone trying to actively preserve free speech in this country. But that shows you just how bad it's gotten. And you can look at the examples. There are countless of them on a day-to-day basis that says we have to engage in this battle and we cannot lose.
All right, my brother, keep up the fight. That's Don Jr. He's in North Carolina for some reason, working on politics, and has this great podcast coming and is publishing for him. But you don't let grass grow under your feet, do you?
No, we keep busy, but again, it's all worth it. And for me, it's honestly just been an honor to be part of that fight. I think I got maybe the Trump fight gene, luckily, or maybe unluckily, depending on how you want to look at it. Like I said, it'd be a lot easier to be quiet and go away in the darkness. But since I don't get the Hunter Biden treatment, I guess I got to fight back.
All right, my friend. Be safe and take care of yourself.
Thanks so much, Mark. Have a good one.